Blood dripped from my fingertips onto the ER floor while I held my side together with both hands. "I'm getting worse," I said. The nurse behind the desk barely looked up. "Insurance." Her badge said Kelly Mears. I swallowed hard. I don't have any right now. That changed everything. A second earlier she'd sounded bored, now she sounded annoyed. She slid my clipboard back toward me like she didn't want to touch it. "Then you'll need to wait for registration review." I stared at her. "I'm bleeding." "Have a seat, ma'am." Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell for updates. A man holding his wrist walked in after me and got taken through the double doors almost immediately. Then another woman, then a teenager with his mother. I stayed in the waiting room with blood soaking through my grey work shirt. Every breath hurt. I stood again because sitting down made the pressure in my side worse. The room tilted when I reached the counter. "Please," I whispered, "something's wrong." This time a man behind the desk finally looked up from his monitor. Darren Pike, intake supervisor. His eyes moved from my face to the empty insurance section on my form. "If you can walk and talk," he muttered, "you can wait." The people around me heard it. I felt every pair of eyes in that waiting room slide toward me at once. Humiliation burned hotter than the pain in my stomach. I stepped away from the counter before they could see me cry. I'd already spent the last 3 months trying not to fall apart. I dropped 2 college classes, picked up extra warehouse shifts, ignored the pain that kept getting worse because I couldn't afford another hospital bill. Tonight I'd collapsed at work. Even then I almost didn't come. I sat back down carefully, pressing harder against my side while the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Somewhere behind the desk, Kelly sighed. "Uninsured patients always show up when we're overloaded." Darren answered quietly, but not quietly enough. "They clog the ER and disappear when the bill comes." My chest tightened. I looked down at my hand. Fresh blood covered my palm. A woman across from me gasped softly when she saw it. The room suddenly felt too hot, too loud. My hearing started fading in and out. Someone near me said, Hey, she doesn't look okay." I tried to stand, but my knees buckled against the chair. That was when the ER doors burst open. A senior doctor walked in fast, talking to another physician beside him, until he saw me. He stopped so suddenly, the other doctor almost ran into him. His eyes locked onto mine. Not confusion. Recognition. Real fear crossed his face. Then he turned toward the intake desk and shouted, "Who told you to leave her here? Do you even know who's she?" Everything changed at once. The same nurses who wouldn't even look at me seconds earlier suddenly rushed forward with a gurney. "Move. Get trauma 2 ready. BP cuff now." I barely understood what was happening. My ears rang while hands grabbed my arms carefully and lifted me onto the bed. The senior doctor knelt beside me himself. Up close I could see grey streaks in his dark hair and exhaustion carved into his face. His badge read, Dr. Elias Morgan, Chief of Surgery. He looked furious. "What's her blood pressure?" he snapped. We haven't taken vitals yet," Kelly admitted. Dr. Morgan turned so sharply toward the desk that even Darren straightened. "You left a bleeding patient in the waiting room without vitals." Darren lifted his hands defensively. She wasn't categorized as critical. I felt the gurney start moving fast down the hallway while lights streaked above me. Dr. Morgan stayed beside me the entire time. "You're going to stay awake for me, Othnella." Hearing my name from him made my stomach twist harder than the pain. I forced out, "You don't have to pretend you know me." For the first time his expression cracked. Not guilt. Shock, like my saying that actually hurt him. But before he could answer, another nurse rushed over. "We need imaging immediately, she's hypotensive." The doors slammed open into trauma care. People surrounded me, cutting away part of my blood-soaked shirt while machines started beeping around me. Someone pressed against my abdomen and I nearly screamed. "How long has this been happening?" a nurse asked. "A while," I whispered. That wasn't a lie. The pain had started weeks ago, but I kept hiding it. I couldn't miss more work, couldn't lose another paycheck. After the surgery months earlier, everything in my life had collapsed faster than I could fix it. I'd stopped going to 2 classes because I physically couldn't sit through them anymore. My manager kept threatening to replace me if I called out again. And every morning, I woke up pretending I wasn't getting worse. Outside the curtain, I heard Dr. Morgan's voice again, harder now. How long was she sitting out there? Darren answered, we were overloaded. That's not what I asked. Silence. Then Dr. Morgan spoke again. Why were no vitals logged? Why wasn't active bleeding flagged? Darren lowered his voice, but I still heard it. She had no billing information on file. The room went quiet for half a second. Then Dr. Morgan said something low enough that I couldn't hear the words, but whatever he said made Darren stop talking completely. A nurse wheeled me toward imaging, while another adjusted my IV. As we passed the station, I heard 2 staff members whispering near the wall. Why is Dr. Morgan acting like this over her? I don't know, I've never seen him this angry. Neither had I. Because I still had no idea why the chief surgeon of the hospital was looking at me like he already knew me. The scan room doors opened. Minutes later, Dr. Morgan stared at the images on the monitor. The color drained from his face. Then he looked at the staff and said, "She should have been treated hours ago." By the time they rushed me back out of imaging, the entire ER felt different. People were moving faster. Voices were sharper. And every time someone looked at me, they looked nervous. "Prep an OR now," Dr. Morgan ordered while walking beside my gurney. "Call surgery, I want a team ready immediately." The nurses who ignored me earlier suddenly couldn't stop checking my monitors. Behind us, I heard Darren trying to regain control. "Everybody calm down," he said loudly near the intake desk. Protocols were followed. A woman from the waiting room stood up immediately. No, they were. I recognized her, the same woman who had watched me almost collapse in my chair. "She was bleeding for over an hour," the woman said. "You people kept taking others before her." Another voice joined in, because she said she didn't have insurance. More people started talking at once. Someone pulled out a phone and started recording. Darren noticed instantly, "Put that away." The woman didn't. "You left her out there while she was passing out," she shot back. The waiting room erupted into overlapping arguments while security guards moved toward the desk. As they wheeled me past registration, I caught sight of Kelly sitting frozen at her computer. Then suddenly she started typing fast. Too fast. Another nurse beside her frowned. "Kelly, what are you doing?" "Fixing intake times," Kelly muttered. My eyes drifted shut for a second from exhaustion, but voices snapped me back. Dr. Morgan had stopped walking. "What did you just say?" Kelly jerked her hands away from the keyboard. Dr. Morgan stepped toward the monitor and stared at the screen. "You altered her chart." Darren immediately stepped in. Nobody altered anything. But Dr. Morgan's voice thundered across the ER. "The timestamps changed." Silence hit the room. Then Darren made the mistake that changed everything. "We're overloaded every night," he snapped. "Uninsured patients disappear without paying all the time. We have to prioritize resources." Even the security guards looked stunned hearing him say it out loud. A man near the vending machines pointed toward me. "So you let her bleed because she's poor?" Nobody answered him. The monitors beside me beeped faster as another wave of pain hit my side. A nurse adjusted my IV while the ceiling lights blurred overhead again. Then I heard someone mention a name. Ava called Dr. Morgan 3 times already. My eyes opened immediately. Before I could stop myself, I whispered, "Is Ava okay?" Everything around my gurney stopped. Dr. Morgan turned toward me, so fast it looked like the air had been knocked out of him. "How do you know my daughter?" The hallway went silent. And for the first time since entering the hospital, I saw fear appear on Darren's face too. Because now he realized this wasn't just another uninsured patient sitting in his waiting room. Before anyone could speak again, a woman in a dark blazer strode into the ER with 2 administrators behind her. She looked directly at Dr. Morgan, then at Darren's, and asked, "Why is the chief surgeon threatening to report his own ER staff?" The moment the administrators arrived, the ER stopped feeling like a hospital and started feeling like an investigation. I was barely conscious as they pushed my gurney toward surgery, but I could still hear pieces of everything happening around me. Pull the intake logs. Get security footage. Who signed off on triage? Darren followed the administrators into a side hallway, with Kelly close behind him. We followed procedure, he insisted. She never described herself as critical. That's not true, another nurse said quietly. Darren shot her a warning look. I caught fragments while the elevator doors opened in front of me. She refused evaluation. We were understaffed. She minimized symptoms. Every excuse sounded more desperate than the last. Then somebody answered. The cameras will show all of it. That shut Darren up. The surgery floor doors opened, and the lights overhead became painfully bright. A nurse squeezed my shoulder gently while another adjusted oxygen beneath my nose. You're going into surgery now, Othnella. I nodded weakly. Before they rolled me through the operating doors, I saw Dr. Morgan standing outside the hallway with one of the younger doctors. The younger doctor looked confused. I've never seen you like this before, he admitted. Who is she? Dr. Morgan stared through the glass at me for a long moment before answering. Months ago, my daughter was dying. The hallway went silent around him. She needed a liver transplant immediately. We found a living donor at the last possible moment. I felt tears sting my eyes even before he said the next part. She refused recognition, refused money, refused to even let us thank her properly. The younger doctor frowned. You're saying? I recognized the surgical scar the second I saw her shirt soaked in blood. Everything inside me tightened. Flashbacks hit all at once. Hospital paperwork. Recovery pains. Missing classes because I couldn't stand upright. Returning to warehouse shifts too early because rent was due. Ignoring complications because follow-up appointments cost money I didn't have anymore. Dr. Morgan's voice grew colder. And your ER staff left her bleeding in a waiting room because she didn't have insurance. One of the administrators looked horrified. Another whispered, "My God." Down the hallway, Darren stepped forward again, his face pale now instead of confident. Nobody told us who she was. Dr. Morgan turned toward him slowly. His voice dropped so low, the entire hallway leaned into the silence. That was never supposed to matter. No one answered him. The operating room doors began closing around me, while nurses rushed beside the table preparing equipment. Then suddenly, the surgery doors burst back open. Every person in the hallway stood at once. When I opened my eyes again, everything felt heavy. The lights above me were softer now. The sharp chaos of the ER was gone, replaced by the steady rhythm of machines and quiet footsteps somewhere nearby. For a few seconds, I didn't remember where I was. Then the pain returned. Not as violent as before, but deep enough to remind me how close things had come. A nurse noticed my eyes opening. Easy, surgery, over. My throat burned. Did it work? You're stable. Stable. The word hit me harder than I expected. Because hours earlier, I'd honestly started wondering if I was going to die in that waiting room, while people walked past me pretending not to see it. The nurse adjusted my IV gently. Dr. Morgan's been waiting outside your room. A few minutes later, he stepped inside slowly. For the first time since he'd recognized me, he didn't look angry. He looked exhausted. I tried to sit up slightly. I'm sorry. His eyebrows pulled together immediately. Sorry for what? For causing all this trouble. The silence after that hurt worse than the surgery. Dr. Morgan pulled a chair beside my bed and sat down carefully. Othnella, he said quietly, do you know how long I've been trying to find you? I looked away. Months earlier, after the donation surgery, the hospital had asked if I wanted contact with the recipient's family. I said no. I hadn't done it for attention. Ava was dying, I matched, that was enough. Dr. Morgan leaned forward, his voice unsteady now. My daughter's liver failed suddenly. We were running out of time. He swallowed hard. Then a 22-year-old college student volunteered to save her life and disappeared before we could even properly thank her. I stared at the blanket across my lap. I didn't disappear, I said softly. I just had bills. That broke something in his expression. He finally understood the rest of it. The missed follow-ups. The untreated complications. The second job. The lack of insurance. Recovering from major surgery while trying to survive financially. I lost coverage after I stopped taking enough classes, I admitted. Then I missed more work because recovery got harder than I expected. Dr. Morgan rubbed a hand across his face slowly. You saved my daughter, he said, and my hospital nearly let you die in the lobby. Before I could answer, the door opened again. A teenage girl rushed inside. Ava. The moment she saw me awake, tears spilled down her face. Oh my God. She crossed the room carefully and hugged me as gently as she could around the monitors and IV lines. You saved my life, she whispered shakily, and they left you there. That was the moment I finally broke. Not in the waiting room. Not during surgery. Here. Safe. Because hearing it out loud made everything real at once. Outside my room, the hospital was already collapsing into damage control. Security footage confirmed I'd repeatedly asked for help while visibly bleeding. Witness videos from the waiting room spread online within hours. Multiple patients gave statements about hearing Darren talk about uninsured people clogging the ER. And Kelly's attempt to alter intake records made everything worse. Both of them were suspended before sunrise. By the next afternoon, investigators were interviewing staff members across the department. The hospital publicly announced an internal review, but it was obvious this had gone far beyond that. There were legal complaints, regulatory investigations, news crews outside the building, and Dr. Morgan refused to protect anyone involved. One administrator quietly asked him if public exposure would damage the hospital's reputation. He answered without hesitation. A woman almost died because your staff cared more about billing status than active bleeding. The reputation damage already happened. For the first time in months, I stopped worrying about money. The hospital covered every surgery and recovery expense connected to the delay. My university reinstated my scholarship after learning why I'd fallen behind. A hospital foundation arranged paid recovery support so I wouldn't lose my apartment while healing. But the strangest part wasn't the financial help. It was the way people looked at me afterward. Weeks later, I returned to the same ER for a follow-up appointment. The same waiting room chairs were still there. Same buzzing lights. Same intake desk. But nobody ignored me this time. Conversations lowered when I walked in. Staff members stepped aside quietly. Some couldn't even meet my eyes. Dr. Morgan met me near the hallway leading toward imaging. For a moment, both of us looked back toward the waiting room where I'd nearly collapsed. Then he asked softly, "Do you regret helping Ava?" I thought about it honestly before answering. "No," I said, "I just wish compassion didn't depend on who people think you are." He didn't reply right away. Because there was nothing to argue with. I looked once more at the chair where I'd sat bleeding, while people decided whether I was worth treating. Then I turned and walked away from it for the last time. The hospital that once left me bleeding would never again be allowed to forget my name.